Hello and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. There are new laws in the state of Texas designed to keep you safer on the roads, and that is especially important as we near the holiday season. Our guests today are Officer James McClellan with the Irving Police Department, Daniel Armbruster with AAA Texas, and Ron Sylvan, the North Texas Executive Director of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. We want to thank them all for being here, and let's get right to talking about this new law. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I want to come to you right away, Daniel, and talk about this new law. Everyone's talking about it. They're saying, hey, this is the prohibition against texting and driving, and hopefully it's going to make a big difference, right?
That's right. And you know, AAA Texas was actually one of the driving forces behind getting this law passed this past year. And September 1st, starting September 1st, is when the law went into effect. And it's really good that we now have this statewide ban. Some people were a little hesitant about it because some cities had stronger laws, they felt, than what is on the books now. But the bottom line is we had this patch quilt of different laws. It was confusing for drivers going from one city to the next. Now we have a statewide ban where every driver in the state of Texas must follow the law when it comes to texting and driving. And it's good that we have this law because texting and driving is becoming obviously a bigger problem as we know, and the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety found that just looking away from the road for 2 seconds, taking your eyes off the road, doubles your risk for a crash. And so it's good that Texas has this law. I think, you know, down the road, many of us would like to see that law strengthened a little bit more, but for now, it's good that we have this in place.
So what's behind the state's decision to enact this law? Why did they decide to do it now?
Well, it actually, this I believe was the third time where Texas tried to pass this law, and of course politics comes into play over the years. I believe it was back in 2002 or 3 where Texas tried to originally pass the law, but the good news is finally did pass, and there was the political will to do it, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so I want to talk to you a minute about this, Officer McClellan. Does this cover all devices? I'm thinking maybe cell phones, and then also what about GPS devices, things like that, or is it just strictly cell phones?
Right, so the law is geared, it's constructed towards wireless communication devices. So it's not every device that's in your car. It primarily refers to cell phones. It could be some other device that could be used to transmit messages back and forth, but primarily it's cell phones.
So if anyone still has like one of those old 2A pagers or something, no 2A texting or whatever, so it specifically is mainly for cell phones, but there are other things. For example, like what could that be?
Well, if somebody had a device that would somehow connect to, say, the internet or some other communications tool, an app or a social media app or something like that, then it's possible that it could relate to that. But, and of course, it's important to note that there are some exceptions within the law towards cell phones, such as making an emergency call. I mean, if there's some emergency circumstance that you need to notify the authorities to, or there are a few other exceptions. But again, I mean, in this day and age, it's primarily geared towards cell phones.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. And I kind of joked a little bit, Daniel, and I mentioned like 2As because like young people watching right now are like, what is that? But when we think about texting and driving, we do often think about young people and them being the ones that committing the crime. But what do the statistics show? Is it young people primarily that's doing the texting and driving?
Well, it's everyone, and that's the big problem. That's why we needed this statewide ban. Although young people, we do see that distractions are one of the top reasons for fatal crashes in the state of Texas. Cell phones are one of the reasons for distractions, but also other passengers. That's why we have the graduated driver's licensing law, where it limits the amount of exposure that those young drivers have to other passengers in the car as well.
Very interesting. And Ron, I know that some of the numbers, the statistics that have come out show that when you see this distracted driving, it's almost as bad, if not as bad, as drunk driving. What are the numbers showing?
Sure. Well, I think that it's definitely on the uptick. So it's something that should be concerning to all of us that share the highways with individuals that are partaking in this kind of behavior. But not part of what we focus on a daily basis at MADD, but certainly support everything that's going on in terms of the legislation and the concern for getting people to modify their behavior.
Well, at this time of year, I have to ask, do you see the numbers usually go up when it's holiday season? Does distracted driving go up?
Well, drunk driving definitely goes up. In 2016, for instance, between Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Eve, there were nearly 900 fatalities due to drunk driving.
So sad.
in this country. So it seems to be concentrated in a big way around holidays, and the Thanksgiving, Christmas holiday is especially bad.
That's really tough to hear, especially as we approach that season. Hopefully, it maybe will change this year. That's what we're hoping will happen. Officer McClellan, I know the Irving DWI unit has actually been very successful in helping to reduce those numbers. Tell us about that success.
Right. So our DWI unit, as well as additional officers, during times when there's a higher likelihood of impaired drivers on the road, and you refer to holidays, 4th of July, Christmas, Thanksgiving, things like that, they have initiatives that they cooperate with the state upon, and for example, one of those being our DWI refusal nights, where we have an increased presence on our highways and our roadways, specifically looking for impaired drivers. And so, of course, the department as a whole supports that partnership, and there is an impact made on the amount of DWI arrests because there just is a higher presence of officers looking for that type of behavior.
Let's talk a little bit more about those no refusal weekends. What should someone expect if they are stopped and you think there's reason to believe that maybe they are driving impaired? What should they expect to happen to them?
Right. So during a no refusal weekend, as they're typically on a Friday and a Saturday night of certain holidays, and so these officers are going to take this no refusal approach, which means on a normal day, on a normal DWI traffic stop, a driver has the option to submit to a testing a specimen of their blood or their breath. They have the right to refuse that testing, but of course there are consequences for doing so. During a no refusal weekend, we are going to obtain a sample regardless, and that is going to be a blood sample always, to retrieve the blood evidence, which would then be analyzed to determine the alcohol concentration in their system. And so once somebody is arrested for the suspicion of drunk driving, the probable cause is achieved to arrest them for the drunk driving charge. The officer will then go to a judge to seek a search warrant to obtain that person's blood. And then, of course, the blood draw is done by an authorized nurse. They take that blood evidence to be used for court purposes later on.
Wow, it sounds like they should just not drink and drive and make it a lot simpler.
Well, that's the goal.
Excuse me. I want to ask you about how the process being different during the holidays as opposed to the other times. You mentioned going to the judge and doing that specifically. Is that not the norm? It's
not the norm now. It is in certain circumstances. If there is a fatality or a near fatality, then at that point our investigators may go to a judge to obtain a warrant to get that blood sample. But just a routine everyday stop for a DWI normally just involves the arrest, and then they're brought to the jail, and at that point they're offered the option to submit to typically a breath test. But again, during these no refusal weekends, then that choice is taken away.
I see. And so, Ron, does MADD support these non-refusal operations?
Definitely. I think it's a huge tool in law enforcement's arsenal to combat the whole issue of drunk driving on our highways. Here in Texas, we're restricted a little bit in what we can do. Other states allow drunk driving checkpoints where cars are actually pulled over and they're put through a range of tests and so on to determine whether they're impaired or not. We're not allowed to do that here in Texas, so the no refusal weekends is a powerful tool.
And Daniel, same question for you. Does AAA Texas also support these operations that take place on non-refusal weekends?
Most certainly. Anything that goes to help law enforcement stop this problem of drinking and driving, it can't be overstated how big of a problem it still is. And we try to get that message out. One drink is too many. If you've had one, call a cab, ride-sharing service, have a designated driver. And it's not just drinking and driving. We're also seeing, even in the state of Texas, drug driving is becoming a problem. We know in Washington State, after they legalized marijuana there, the rates of crashes involving impaired drivers who were under the influence of drugs doubled. And it's not just marijuana, it's also other illegal drugs, and also prescription drugs are a big problem as well.
Interesting. Now, someone watching right now may be thinking, like, why is this even important, or why is it such a big issue? But, Officer, can you tell us exactly why this evidence is so important, the blood evidence, when you're in the courtroom?
Right. So, normally speaking, if an officer makes an arrest for DWI and the arrestee does not submit to a breath test, then in the courtroom, the evidence is largely perhaps body camera or dash cam video in the officer's testimony, and sometimes that can come down to a matter of opinion, that based on the officer's opinion and his judgment, coupled with the driving behavior, he has reached the determination that that person is intoxicated and does not have the normal use of their functions to operate a car, or the divided attention ability to operate a car in a safe manner. A blood test eliminates virtually all of that judgment or opinion, because the blood analysis clearly shows that the person is over the limit, and of course a blood test, everyone, a jury particularly, can relate to a blood test very easily. We all have to go to the doctor and have a blood draw done for various reasons, and so it makes it so much easier to understand to a jury and to illustrate that there's just no uncertainty in proving that the person was over the limit just based on that blood analysis.
Wow, and once the jury or the judge makes the decision, what are the range of punishments?
So that varies so much. It's not a very easy question to answer, because you can have a first-time offender that is arrested and they're going to serve a very minimal amount of time in jail and perhaps face a fine. Of course, all the way up to a person that would cause a crash resulting in a fatality, then obviously the punishment range is a serious felony and could carry a lot of jail time. So it really runs the range, but of course that's just the legal impact. I mean, most folks depend on driving as part of their employment, and so there's a secondary cost, if you will, to potentially losing your job or having to hire an attorney for the court battles and stuff like that. So
wow.
It's quite severe.
Definitely sounds severe, a lot to consider. And Ron, I want to come to you and ask you a quick question now, because when you talk about this and you talk about the people that are the offenders, what's the common age or average age, would you say?
You know, I think it's across the board, but definitely twice as many men as women are convicted of drunk driving. And we see offenders in their teens all the way, through their senior years. So it's a wide range. I would guess the sweet spot might be, between 25 and 35, 40. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
And is that what you would say is with the ages when they actually start to become offenders?
No, what's really interesting, one of the statistics that we use on a regular basis is that most drunk drivers that upon their first arrest have likely, on average, driven drunk 80 times before they were arrested.
Oh, that's horrible.
So it just kind of underscores the issue that we deal with.
That's very sad. And Daniel, AAA Texas has a particular focus on teaching teens, since we're talking all ages here, to be more responsible when on the road. So what do you teach them about drunken or impaired driving at that age?
Yeah, so that's through our program called Dare to Prepare. It's a free program where we, anyone, you don't have to be a AAA member. If you have a teen that's getting ready to drive, you can just call us and we'll set up a class for that. But what we teach them is, again, one drink is too many, and also, this not only affects you, this can affect other people. When you're on the road, you're not just affecting yourself, you're affecting everyone around you. And so it's important for them to understand that, and that driving is not a right, it's a privilege. And it's a responsibility to be taken very seriously.
Definitely. And tell me a little bit about the Teen Driver Safety Fair.
So we just had that actually, and Irving Police and Mothers Against Drunk Driving, both there. And it's a great event. It's a free, fun, educational way to teach teens about the responsibility of driving, and to also explain some of the challenges that they may have ahead. And Irving Police Department, they were out there and had this impaired driving, kind of a cone zone. So you put I guess what you call fatal vision goggles on and allow them to drive through this course. And what those goggles do is they kind of give you an idea of the balance and vision that you might have if you're impaired, to basically demonstrate, look, you can't even do this on this little obstacle course. Could you imagine doing this on a real roadway?
Huh, that's good. And sometimes people need that visual, and especially young people, so that's great that you had that opportunity for them, and hopefully it impacted them in a huge way. Now, Ron, I know something that people are impacted by are the statistics, the numbers they see on your website when it comes to teens. It's really alarming. I mean, people are sometimes surprised about how teen driving under the influence really is. So tell us about the numbers you collect, the numbers that are there. For those who haven't seen the statistics, what do they show?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. We certainly have focused on underage drinking for quite some time now. And for a while, it was on the rise. What we're seeing now is that it's really declining, the alcohol piece of it, and what's on the rise is the use of marijuana and prescription drugs. So,
Wow.
and then what's really scary is when they combine the alcohol with one of those other items, and then you've really got a nasty situation.
I can imagine. Officer McClellan, I want to come back to you and talk about teens too, because I know you have something special that the Irving Police Department offers teens around prom season, and people start thinking about, oh, what happens at prom time? Well, there's a special class that you hold for teens that is for DWI awareness. Can you tell us about that program?
Yes, and so our DWI unit, in addition to obviously going out there and making DWI arrests, I mean, education is a very big component for them. And so what they will do is actually go with these students, they will go hands-on and give them a chance to actually experience that. And as we talked about, we set up the cone course, and they're allowed to drive this cone course in our golf cart.
How cute. We get to see as you talk about that. Go ahead.
Right, and so as you can see, they're driving through our cone course and without the goggles on, and they can just maneuver their way through there. But then afterward, they're put on these fatal vision goggles, and then obviously driving what it's like to be impaired or drunk. And so then they don't do so well. And when they actually see and can touch and hands-on and participate in it, and they realize, well, this is really quite a serious issue, and it goes a lot further than just trying to explain it to them, give them a lecture. And in addition to that, we also bring out a car that was that we seized following a fatal crash.
Oh, wow,
and
look at
the
that.
kids can actually get up there and touch the car, and they hear the story behind the car, and it really makes an impact on them in terms of how serious this is and what the consequences are. We get a lot of great feedback from it, and as I say, with the age group like that, it just goes so much further than trying to just instruct to them and teach them in a classroom setting. It's much more hands-on.
Tell me about the feedback. What do they say?
Oh, they love it. I mean, of course, it's an eye-opener to them. They get to come out during their class period and go hands-on, and we always have such great feedback from all of the classes and the faculty at the schools that they go to. You really can't measure how successful and hopefully make an impact on them to take the issue of drinking and driving seriously.
Nice. And Daniel, what about the teen safety fair? What kind of feedback do the kids give you on that?
Well, it's great, and in addition to the cone course that those teens got to participate in and those hands-on experiences, also the stories that they hear from the victims that speak at the event and telling their story about what happened to them is very impactful, because it puts a face and on that headline. It's more than just another news story or something you see on social media. And I think that's very powerful. And when I was trying to organize the event and find a speaker, I thought it would be so difficult to find someone to speak about that who had been impacted, even though we know it's an issue.
Sure.
And unfortunately, in a sad way to say this, it wasn't that hard at all. There's so many people. It's almost become like cancer. In a way, someone who's been impacted by this in some form or fashion. And so for those teens to be able to hear that, I think those stories is very impactful.
Definitely, I can imagine, and they are very impactful to people of all ages. Ron, I want to ask you, people get involved with organizations for different reasons and do things for different reasons. Why is it important for you to be involved with Mothers Against Drunk Driving?
Well, yeah, the issue of drunk driving is personally impacted me. I lost my father at age 16 to a drunk driver. So I personally experienced the impact it had on the rest of my family. So, it's really exciting for me to be in a position now professionally to deal with an issue that has been with me for years and years.
Daniel, would you like to add your story?
Sure. I had a family member, a cousin of mine, when I was in high school, who was involved in a drinking and driving accident. She wasn't killed in that accident, but today she is a quadriplegic because of that. And, that's just kind of the start of it as well. I also worked in television news as a reporter, and seeing traffic accident after traffic accident after traffic accident, and talking to those families and hearing what they had to say about it. You feel like in this role you can do something about that, and so that's one of the reasons.
Thank you for sharing that story. Ron, coming back to you for a minute, with the holiday parties coming very soon, everyone's getting those invitations out and planning to have these celebrations. And people often think, oh yeah, well, I'm listening to them talk, but that won't be my story. That won't be my testimony because I know how to handle my liquor or I don't drink that much. But the truth is, people may not think they're impaired, but they really are. They get that out there on the road and they're overindulging. How much can a person have, or is there a certain number of people can have to drink and still be okay?
Yeah, I would say that you need to plan ahead and not even bring that equation into play, right? I mean, with all of the options that people have nowadays, the shared ride, whether it's Uber, Lyft, or hopping on Dart, or designating a driver, those are all things that everyone should think about ahead of time before they go to these parties and have a plan. And don't take the chance that that you can drink X amount of drinks in a certain period of time and still be okay, because your judgment just isn't it's not where it needs to be at that point in time, and it's not worth taking the chance.
May need to have a little sleepover party, right?
You
Everybody
bet,
just
you
hang
bet,
out.
yes.
Officer McClellan, when you do pull someone over and they appear to be impaired, or they might be after the testing, what kind of excuses do they give you?
Well, really, it kind of goes back to what Ron said. I mean, most people don't think that they're drunk or that they're beyond the point of being able to safely operate a car, and that really is the biggest thing that we hear. And so, I mean, I can't emphasize that enough in terms of planning ahead, and we heavily encourage that, especially during these no refusal periods, to just plan ahead, because it is so easy to be able to make other arrangements, and of course anybody that would ever have a DWI would look back and wish they could do it all over again, and so even there are a lot of businesses and organizations that will provide folks with a ride home at no charge. They don't want that coming back on them, and they'll offer to have the car towed home even and provide a ride. But I mean, again, going back to your question, people just don't realize that they're past that point. They think they're fine, and we see that over and over again.
Interesting. Now, Daniel, they've both said plan ahead, plan ahead. What recommendations does AAA Texas suggest to keep people safe on the roadways in the holiday season?
Plan ahead, but again, have that designated driver, have ride sharing in your phone, an app, or even save the number to a taxi company. But the bottom line, again, is one drink is too many, and don't get behind the wheel if you've had one.
Good advice. Now, I know a lot of people that are watching may not be aware that MADD headquarters is based right here in Irving, which is wonderful. We're delighted to have you here. This is the North Texas chapter. Tell me about your relationship that you have with the Irving Police Department.
We have a wonderful relationship with the Irving Police Department, as well as law enforcement throughout the entire country. I mean, they are on the front lines. They're the individuals, men and women, who are out there combating the issue on a regular basis. So here in Irving, we are blessed with a wonderful DWI squad as part of the force, and we utilize a lot of officers to help train both our volunteers, and we also do some training for attorneys and other practitioners, and we're always utilizing Irving PD to help us with those. Over and above that, we do, our largest fundraising event nationwide is Walk Like MADD, and we just had our event here in Las Colinas about a month ago, and one of the top fundraising teams in our walk this year, as it has been for several years, was a team led by Steve Burris, who is on the DWI squad, and they just come out in full force and support us in every way possible.
Well, we got to check out some of the video. It looks like everyone had a good time and actually got to actually see some people that were experiencing some tough times too, and just love on them and share the love and let them know that they're there to support them. Of course, there are some people watching right now that may want to support MADD. How can they go about doing so? Volunteering or donating? What do
you bet. What a lot of the general public doesn't understand is that we spend the bulk of our time providing victim services. So, and all those services are provided at no cost, and much of it is facilitated through volunteer support. So, we have all sorts of positions, if you will, available for volunteers who want to get plugged in with this particular issue. So I would suggest they go to MADD.org, to our website, and they can explore what opportunities might exist, and give us a call or drop us an email, and we're happy to engage them.
Wonderful. And I know both MADD and also, in addition to MADD, we also know that AAA Texas, you guys are all very active in Austin, and there's other legislation you may want to see passed. What would that include?
You know, I think talking about the distracted driving law, the statewide texting ban, I think making that a little bit more focused on not just texting on your phone, but also making sure that, you know, any distraction in your car is dangerous, and that goes to the navigation system, your radio, eating while you're driving. We've seen people put on makeup or fix their hair while they're driving.
Like
I didn't know.
I feel a little guilty. I'm
I
going
know
to stop
you've never
doing
done
it.
that, but
I'll stop.
but it is fairly common, and all jokes aside, a very serious problem. And so I think, you know, down the road, just making sure that the statewide texting ban becomes even stronger.
Wonderful. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, you know, in a more general sense, you know, we have been advocates for years for ignition interlock devices, and we have laws now in 30 states, but that leaves 20 states that we still need to pass some legislation. Here in Texas, we do have laws, although we could stand to strengthen them a little bit. So our push here locally will be to continue to force the issue in terms of any offender, especially first-time offenders, to comply with a mandatory ignition interlock.
Wonderful, interesting. Yeah, so sometimes just the awareness, people knowing what you need, helps tremendously. So hopefully people will get involved with that push. Before we leave, we're just about out of time, but Officer McClellan, something else that's really, really interesting and can be dangerous if people are not paying attention, construction. And there's lots of it in North Texas and in Irving in particular too. So any advice for those that have to drive through it day in and day out?
Slow down. The biggest issue that we see, especially with 183 being under construction with so many accidents, the factor is speed. The road conditions are changing every day, exits are moving, there's equipment on the roadways coming and going, and it's just the easiest way to avoid a collision, and then of course, you know, create a traffic tie-up is just to slow down, and that would be my single piece of advice. And
bringing it back to the holiday season, is that your same advice? Just slow down? Well, sure. You know, everybody's busy. You know, pay attention. They're rushing around. They got a lot on their mind, and of course, you know, obviously the message here is don't drink and drive. But I mean, but pay attention, stay alert, and slow down. So your last word, Daniel, what do you say to people for this holiday season? And, you know, in addition, we were talking about what do you tell people, in addition to planning ahead, if you're hosting a party, have non-alcoholic beverages for your guests, you know, so that those people who are designated drivers don't show up and then feel pressured to drink alcohol. But, you know, look out for each other, slow down. Speed is one of the top factors for crashes. Also, buckle your seatbelt. Don't be distracted, and of course, never drink and drive. Love it. And last but not least, your advice? I would say that drunk driving is 100% preventable, and we need to all be part of that solution. So. Well, thank you. You all have been a part of spreading the awareness for this holiday season, and we sure hope it's going to make a big difference. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And thank you for watching this edition of Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. Please be sure to join us on Thursday, December 14th at 1:30 p.m. for our next edition of the show. We'll see you then.